Did you guys know we got a Jeep project here in the shop that we've been working on? Well, check it out here. We're starting to actually kind of look like something. Today's video, we're going to work through kind of some of the problems, situations that we've got with putting together a chassis for this and figuring out where all the stuff needs to be laid out. But before that, we'll catch you guys up on real quick what we did before all this so you can all be on the same page, and then we'll get to work knocking this stuff out. So we started this build off with a fresh, brand new, unmolested body. And what's the first thing that we do with it? Molest it, of course. Cut it in half, and we did a 10-inch stretch in through here to give a little more room in the passenger area. After getting it cut in half and pulled apart, I just make some panels real quick, put this thing back together. Not a big deal. Next up, we got a front end kit from Speedway Motors. It's got a frame section there and all of our front suspension that we're going to need to be able to make this thing feel like it's riding on rails when we're out cruising around in it. So we got to get this stuff all put together. The next step of that would be to put some wheels and tires on this thing, and also sit the motor and tranny down in here so that we can have an idea of where everything's going to sit, so we can start laying out and planning for how the chassis is going to be put together. So that was basically the down and dirty of the first two videos that we did on the Jeep here. And now, since then, we've got some wheels and tires mounted, balanced, and bolted up here to this front end so that we can continue forward. So, like I said to begin with, the goal of this thing is to make this have the chassis and the body sitting all the way on the ground with these big tires on there. So we have to have these in place first to begin with to be able to know where it is that our end goal is supposed to be at. And now that we have all this stuff in place, we can start working on worrying about how to do the air ride up here in the front, and then know from here where we're going to be extending the chassis down to. So originally the G-Comp front end kit here is set up to have a coilover, bolted in here. And that's a great setup and all, but it's not adjustable and it's not going to give us the air ride and the cool factor that we're going for with the air ride. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of have the coilover, we're going to have one of these shocks. It's a Ride Tech shock, and it's got an air bag over the top of it. So Firestone bag, Ride Tech shock. It's adjustable. I want to say it's like 20 different positions on the adjustability of this. So we ought to be able to clock this thing in here and make it ride really good and handle really good. Also, having the independent front suspension and stuff, you can see that we've got some pretty good camber in here right now. So this thing ought to go around corners really, really well and drive amazing. Originally, I was thinking that I would probably do something like this with these inboard and then do kind of a bell crank cantilever type little deal up here at the top that would then pivot and then come down with a push rod coming through and just go down to our lower shock mount here on this bottom A-arm. But since we got these here now and I'm sitting here looking at it again, I'm going to see if it's possible to go ahead and just cut the top of this off right here, which I have to remove anyways to be able to get my push rod in place. And then maybe, just maybe, this might fit right in there and be good that way, and we won't have to do the whole bell crank setup and all of that. It'll be a little bit cleaner look and all that, so that'd be cool. It'll be a little less work, and it'll also open up this middle section here to not have anything in that area there, so we can put some more stuff there and kind of help package this whole thing together, because these Jeeps don't have a lot of room in them. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this cut off, and we're gonna see how this is gonna fit. So looking at it here, it's going to be really, really close to whether or not it'll work in here like this or not. And I honestly don't know yet if it's going to. I think I'm going to have to go ahead and clearance off a little bit more of this along the top here, which is fine. And for anybody that's worrying about whether or not I'm taking away any strength of the suspension, you got to think about this a little bit. So that hat that was out here that I just cut off, the main reason that was there is for a shock mount. So that means that that was going to be where it was going to have all of the load of the suspension. If we're doing it like this, we're actually changing the load of the suspension to go to whatever point this is. So we're going to take a lot of weight off of this right here. The only thing at that point that this is doing then is keeping this from going sideways at that point. And on this side, it's got a big gusset on this side here that's a piece of like 1/4 inch that's been broke, and then up there kind of triangle wedge thing going on here. And we still do have some of the strapping left here on the back. I didn't remove all of that, so, and it goes clear to the top. I am going to have to remove a little bit more of it now, but I'm still not worried about whether or not I'm taking away any strength here on the front suspension. I'm fully confident that that's going to be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and hack on this some more here, I guess, and I'll bring you back here after I get that done, and we'll see what we look like then. Okay, well, it's been a couple days since I shot any video for you guys, but in that time frame, I've done a bunch of stuff here to set this thing up. And I've kind of decided that it's going to be so close on the shock airbag situation over there that I really need to just go ahead and put the rest of the chassis together and then kind of see where I end up at that point, because it's really, really close. And I went ahead and got the other side cut off. Went ahead and put the tires and wheels back on it, got this thing cycled to where it will be as low as it'll possibly go on this front frame section, and then I leveled it all out, and then you can see these legs that are stuck underneath here. We've got those all set in place on all 4 corners of this front section. Now, some of this is going to get cut off probably. I'm going to grab the grill shell. I'm shooting for something in that neighborhood right there, where the grill shell will be pretty much right above where the sway bar is at. Then they might have a little stub bumper out here in the front past that, but they'll actually put our front bumper probably here right in line with the front of our tires. That's the look you should have on a Jeep, I think, in my opinion. So that's what we're going to go for there. So this out here doesn't really matter, other than we're just using it now to help set everything all up. So now that I got this kind of set where it needs to be, then I wanted to go ahead and try to pull the motor up here and put the motor kind of in place where it's going to be. It's got some really funky motor mounts that these things have from the factory. I've never messed with those before, and they're really kind of weird. I think we're going to have to take those off and kind of redo all of that into a more hot rod-ish style mount, I guess, if you will. But anyways, the biggest thing with the motor is I can't really bring it farther forward any more than where it's at right now, which isn't a problem, because that still leaves us with plenty of room in here to do whatever behind the grill and the radiator. If we end up having to move the shocks inboard and all that, won't be a problem. And I had to move the motor up also, as well as back just a little bit, because there's a mount over here for the alternator that kind of hangs off to the side. I'll take you over there and I'll show you. So yeah, I can't really go any farther forward here because I'm only about an inch away from the alternator off of this front A-arm right here. So we're going to call that good as far as how far forward we're bringing this thing. And that actually makes it pretty cool too, because this is now technically a mid-engine Jeep as far as that goes, because the whole entire motor is past the center line of the front axle, or axle, if you will. So mid-engine Jeep, that's going to help out with our airbags up here in the front, because these are technically not supposed to be on the front of most vehicles, but this thing's going to be light enough on the front that I don't think it's going to be a problem. So we've got no issues there. We're going to be able to get our belts and all that stuff on here as far as all that goes. And now we need to start looking at building the rest of the frame going down. But another leg back here, like I said, on all 4 corners to make this leveled out right exactly where it needs to be. And we probably aren't going to use this much of the frame rail back here either. I'm probably going to come up in here somewhere and start coming down, and then I want to bring it out to kind of the outside edge of the Jeep so the frame rail can go on that side, and then we're going to do a roll cage in this thing that's going to be tied to that frame rail as well. So that'll help tie everything all together. And it's also going to help us get around like these manifolds right here, because right now if we tried to extend off of this, the manifold's in the way worse on the other side than this side. So we can't go that route even if we wanted to. You can also see now that we've got plenty of room underneath the belly of this thing too. So even when the frame rails go all the way down to the ground, we're still going to have, you know, oh, what is that? That's a 2x3 and a 3/4, so almost 3 inches underneath the tranny pan, and probably a little over 3 inches on the front one. So pretty decent. So I think my next step here to try to start figuring out exactly where the frame rails are going to come down is to go ahead and get the body back up here and start hacking on it to be able to get it to where the tranny is going to go down through the floorboard and through the firewall. So once we get that kind of set in place and we can know how far forward we can go, then we can have an idea of like where the bends need to be and whatnot in our chassis to be able to line up everything with the body. I think it's going to look pretty good. Put the firewall up in this neighborhood here somewhere. That's not too bad of a spacing in between there. I think that's going to be all right. So I'm going to get the body up here next and start carving on that a little bit. You can probably hear the stove back here heating up and ticking, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the loud fan that I've got on that thing on. So I'm just going to cut to some time lapse, I guess, now, and we'll get some work done. Well, that kind of gives you guys an idea of the direction we're going here. And I didn't mention anything about it earlier. Yes, we could have raised the motor up and shoved it forward and got it, you know, a little bit farther up there on the front end. But this is the reason why I didn't. You see here now already that the engine is already about 5.5, 6 inches over the top of the cow, and that's with the floor being off the floor here, or off the ground here, at 3 inches because of the height of the frame. So our front grill shell is a little bit too high as well. It's sitting there at about 30 inches, and this is about 25.5. So I could notch the bottoms of the grill right there and get it dropped down. We can make that work if we needed to go that direction. Or I kind of almost am considering the idea of raising the body up even a little bit more. Now, we do want the appearance of this having the body all the way down to the ground, but we can cheat a little bit, and here's kind of what I'm thinking to cheat. So I already knew it was going to be the 3 inches off, and I've already been thinking about it and planning this, and now we might just make it a little bit higher yet. So rather than having this look like there's a space here and then still having a frame rail just inside of it, I was figuring that we'd just add a little piece onto the bottom of this and we could actually put dimple die holes in it all the way around or something too. I think it would look pretty sweet. And then we could even backlight it with some lights or something and make it pretty cocky looking. So that's kind of the direction I was already thinking with this. We can raise this body up a little bit higher. We could just make this panel a little bit bigger, and that might be the way to go. It'll help us have a little bit better look with the engine, and will help us line up with the front grill shell a little bit better too. Also gives us a little bit better height inside here as well. Like right now, we're just barely clearing the transmission, but I could actually take, and if we raise this up, I can get it to go forward another couple inches and actually have this dialed in right where we need it to be with the opening that we already have right now. So there's a lot of pluses to going ahead and raising this up. And also, since we stretched this here, I don't think you'll really notice it too much that it's a little bit thicker through here. I think it'll kind of help the proportions a little bit as well too. So the other part of this is going to be the rear end, and we're about 17 inches off the floor to the top of the tube, and then we need another probably 6 inches to clear the top of the diff in the center. Let's see what we look like over there. So that actually will let us clear the tube right here inside the body. So that's kind of nice that we're already there. And then, well, 17 plus 5 or 6 is going to put us at the top of the diff pretty well level and lined up with the top of the side rail here. We could make that work and sheet it just all the way across the top here. But again, I think if we go ahead and raise the body up a little bit, it's going to help us have that, you know, a little bit more clearance that we're going to need. What do we got in here? Or 3 inches in there. So really, if we raised it up 3 inches, then we could deck in top of here, right on top of the wheel well inside here, still have a little bit of a lip, which would be kind of nice to keep so that it has that same look and feel of a Jeep, and keep the diff and everything underneath all of that. So that'd be pretty good. It's gonna make our stuff line up better in the front. So I'm gonna kick this around a little bit longer here and make sure that that's not screwing me somewhere else. But I can't think of anywhere else at the moment that that's gonna be a problem. Brakes, let's look over here at where we're gonna be able to put a master cylinder and stuff. Okay, so for the master, and I guess we need to look at steering too while we're over here. But for the master, we need something with power brakes. We've already got a nice handling front end. We've got tons of horsepower. We need to make this thing stop as good as it goes. So we need the master cylinder with power brakes, and if we put a booster on here, I don't know if we put it outside here. By the time we move this forward a little bit and up a little bit, I think we're going to be probably right into the head. So outside here is probably not an option. We could do one that is under the floor, which if we raise the floor of this thing up a little bit, we might actually have enough room to do that. I'll have to get some measurements and see how big some of those vacuum boosters are. And the other option, I guess, would be to maybe put something in here with a 90-degree mount and have it all underneath the dash. So we can look at some of that stuff too. I'll have to get in the internet and check and see some of our dimensions and things like that to see what's going to actually work out best for any of that. So potentially raising it up is going to help us with that situation. It's also going to probably help us with our steering too, because I'm sitting there looking at the steering, and I'm just going to run this tape measure straight down to the rack because I can see an eyeball on it right here. So that's where our steering's coming out. So that's not too bad actually right there. That would probably be pretty good. Can't make it in a straight shot because there's going to be a motor in our way, so we'll have to put a couple of U-joints in it to be able to get around the motor, but it should be pretty doable. Well, we got the body up now, and the body is pretty close to the grill shell. I think we're at about 29 inches on the top of the firewall versus the 30 of the grill. So we could still take the grill down a little bit if we needed to or whatever. So we'll just leave that for now. This could potentially even go up that other inch if it needed to, but it's starting to be a pretty good sized piece that we're gonna have to add there. So I'm gonna play this all out real quick and just kind of see where we're at from this point. So I did go ahead and research what we had for measurements for the brake booster and all of that, and we're definitely gonna have to have it not out here. We can't have it out here, that won't fit. And then unfortunately, trying to do like a 90-degree one and put it underneath the dash doesn't fit either, because I think the pedal, the shortest one I've seen was like 17 inches to the bottom of the pedal and then to the top of the master cylinder. And we're only at like 21 inches over here by where the pedal would go, if it's on the other side, of course. So at 21 inches, that puts that pedal only like 3 inches off the floor. That doesn't work. You're not gonna be able to have a good feel of the pedal at that point. So, and if you cut the arm off, make it shorter, then you lose a bunch of your leverage on how that actually feels too. So I think we're kind of stuck with putting it underneath the body. Hopefully that's not going to be a big issue, because we've got right at really close to like 6.5 or so underneath here now on the body is what we're sitting at. And I think most of them are looking at around 7 inches, maybe a little over 7 inches for the master cylinder lid and all that kind of stuff to the bottom of the booster area there. So we might have to play and finagle that a little bit to make that work, but I think we're pretty well stuck with putting it underneath the floor. And then that also brings into consideration whereabouts the frame rail is going to be there too. We don't want to put it to where it's going to be a problem with the booster and all that stuff either. So I'm going to have to kind of get some measurements there, figure that kind of stuff out a little bit. I've also been playing around with the rear end some too, and the top mounts on the rear end do not clear the frame rail if we bring it all the way out here. And we'll probably end up cutting them off anyways, but if we move it in just inboard a little bit from being all the way out here to the edge, then we can actually line up with the bottom mounts that are already on the rear end, and that'll save us from having to make all of that stuff to be able to mount the bottom mounts. So might go ahead and see if that's going to be an option and see if that'll work out and still be okay with where our master cylinder is going to go in here underneath the floor. Oh, fuel tank. Also was looking at that. I think I found a fuel tank that's going to work back here. I already had kind of an idea of where we're going to be at with the fuel tank based off the other Jeep that we did. So it's going to have to go back behind the rear end. And then also somewhere in this thing, we've got to package a compressor and a tank to be able to control all the air ride stuff. So yeah, we're out of room really, really quickly. And we haven't even got started yet. So you can sit here and play this guessing game of, you know, what parts are we going to use, what where all day long. And at some point, though, you just have to commit to saying this is what we're going to do and deal with the consequences later. So I think that's what point we're at right now. And I think I've got a pretty good idea of what we need to do for some frame rails and what, you know, where the body's going to sit and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and get started cutting some metal up, and we're going to start laying out some frame rails and just kind of see where this ends up and see how far we can get before we get done with the video today. the chassis. We've got all the way up basically to where our rear suspension is going to start to mount, and we're going to have to step up to go over the rear end. And I think now the next step is going to be to go ahead and put the motor back in here and tranny back in here and try to get that kind of set in place 100% for sure and centered up, and see if we can't get that stuff mounted, and go ahead and start looking at trying to mount the body up here and everything as well too. And then we can move on to finishing up the back end of it after we've got that stuff all set in place. But that's going to have to, unfortunately, be on another video on another day because we're out of time for this one. So appreciate you guys following along, and I will see you guys again next Wednesday at 7.